And at that point, that is when I realized, like, okay, we need structure. We need process. We need to think about how we're doing these things, because we've just been reacting to and saying yes to. And that's the kind of stuff that in startup mode is awesome. It's challenging out there. Maybe, and we used a recruiter. We only did that once because the outcome was, it was sort of just lackluster for everybody. It cost us a bunch of money. The person didn't end up lasting more than a week past their warranty or whatever it was that we had with the recruiting company. I think it also comes from a place of like, I worked in a previous agency, and it was a sink or swim kind of environment, right? And I think those who swam in that environment went on to swim very well. I think it also drowned a lot of people, and so that's, for me, it was like, I knew that I didn't want to sink or swim, but I also know you can't just do people's jobs for them.
With me today is Erik Rubadeau. He is the CEO of YeeBoo Digital, helping nonprofits scale and grow through digital marketing and technology. And today we'll talk a little bit more about the digital marketing space, all of that, but also on how to actually scale and grow an agency, step out of it, truly become a CEO, and all the things you would need to know around that whole world. So Erik, let's start with there. Talk to me a little bit more about YeeBoo Digital. Exactly what do you guys do? How do you do it? How does that work for nonprofits?
Yeah, you bet. So we are, we focus specifically on the nonprofit sector, and we help clients in kind of three core areas. One, they're all in and around what we would call revenue generation. Nonprofits, like any business, have to raise money to survive, right? So that's for us a big piece of the puzzle. We help organizations leverage technology, digital marketing, and kind of the digital ecosystem to raise revenue and to be able to push their missions forward. So, for us, that involves helping them with things like websites and marketing tools like MarTech Stack, digital marketing campaigns, so actually helping them run programs. And then we offer a program as well, which is our support services, which helps organizations with capacity enhancement. So we're trying to sort of offer a bit of a holistic solution for organizations to get the most out of what digital can do for them.
What is the difference? Someone will say like, okay, YeeBoo Digital, you're working with non-for-profits. What will be the difference in working with a for-profit versus a non-profit or charitable organizations?
Yeah, I think one of the things that probably sets it apart right away is we don't have a product. What we are frequently in the business of doing is helping organizations communicate and connect with audiences to get people to donate. And so, when you are, air quotes, selling a feeling of doing the right thing, that's a little bit different than, something that somebody might inherently want and is going to get something from. And when you make a donation to charity, you're not getting an iPod or anything else that comes with that, right? There is no kind of there is no physical, tangible thing, with some minor exceptions. And so for us, I think that's one of the big things is when we're working with organizations where it's how do you work with organizations in a way that they can make people feel like they've done the right thing and continue to do the right thing, because people want to do the right thing. People want to support organizations. People want to support change. But how do you market that? So that is the challenge that we're up against with organizations all the time.
No, it sounds like that there is a strong component around the copywriting of how do you sell the feeling, how do you convince or show someone to continuously donate for change? Is that a big component of what makes it successful, like a campaign for a non-for-profit?
Yeah, I think traditionally that was pretty much the cornerstone. When you think of direct mail, which has kind of been the cornerstone of organizations' revenue generation strategies for the last 50 plus years, the copywriting it's so important. These days, it's not that it's not important; it's just different. You have very different mediums by which people will consume your message, whether that's, connected TV or a bus shelter ad or, an email or an SMS. There's a lot of different places. And so it's a little bit less about, I think good copywriting, don't get me wrong, is still incredibly important. But, these days, I think the storytelling, the video, those aspects are probably even more important. But more than that, it's about how do you use all of these things available to you to create a like a multi-channel experience, if you will, for someone who really, wants to connect with the brand, wants to sort of follow along, and wants to feel like they're making a difference.
In the way that you're describing things, that there's always a multi-channel approach and there's a lot of angles to it. And you said copywriting is part of it, but in your approach, you're focusing on digital marketing and technologies. Mm-hmm. What are the technologies that non-for-profits should have, or are actually talking to right now, they're actively implementing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a host of things. Certainly, the website, if you will. And so we build a lot of WordPress websites for organizations. The website is kind of a cornerstone. It's your, it's your 24/7 doormat. It's where people go to kick the tires on who you are and what you do. And so the website is a big piece of that. The other pieces that we help organizations with are kind of more in the marketing technology stack. So that's things like, email tools, donation platforms, advocacy platforms, SMS platforms. And so, and how do they actually and these are the tools that help them foster the relationships, right? So you can think of them as like the stewardship tools, right? Like, and these things are really important, both from how they work and what they can do, but also, making sure that the people inside the organizations understand how to get the most out of them.
That's very interesting. Now, if you're looking at the technology, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that a lot of people will be like, I don't know, WordPress websites, for example.
Yep.
What is the feeling around WordPress websites nowadays?
I mean, we doubled down on WordPress a few years ago, by and large, because we used to touch a lot of things, Joomla and Drupal and stuff like that, and we just what I think what we liked most about WordPress and why we kind of leaned into it is the admin experience is clean. It is something, one of the biggest, sidebar for a second here, but one of the biggest issues in the nonprofit sector is high turnover. A lot of people moving through roles, moving up roles, and that means that, having a complicated CMS, just as an example, that no one's ever seen before, makes hiring for that role actually really challenging. WordPress is like 75% of the internet. And so even, regardless of if you've seen it in one particular flavor or another, one of the reasons why we like WordPress so much is because from a hiring perspective, from getting the next person to support the organization and having them be able to, sort of use the skills that they have, a lot of people have had some, if not more, experience with, doing admin of a WordPress website. And that doesn't mean that they know theme development or, custom block creation or things like that, but they understand creating pages, they understand creating posts, they understand, how to sort of go about doing it. So it's, there are lots of great CMS systems out there and ways of going about doing it. But one of the reasons we've doubled down on WordPress is it also means that, like, in the future, if the organization isn't working with us and is working with somebody else, finding a developer who can build or add on or scale on to what they've already got is also not, there's lots of options out there. So I think for us, it's a combination of those things. Plus we like the flexibility of how we can build with it. So
it's something that I know back in the day I used to develop with WordPress, and when Webflow came about, it looked different, and then Elementor started kind of becoming more popular. So then you're like, I don't really see a huge difference in these two. Nowadays, people pop up these websites with like Claude Code, with ChatGPT, so they're more, in my view there, I'm like, these are not easy to manage or maintain or to change. You want to change a small button on a WordPress, like that's like a 2-minute job. This one, I feel like you need to do a little bit more. Have you had experiences where the non-for-profit says, hey, we used Lovable and this is our website, maintain it?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain things that we're good at. There are certain things that we're not. And if there's something that's not a fit for us, we do try to say, there's probably somebody out there that's a great fit for this. It might not be us in this case. One of the things, and you sort of touched on it for a second there, like, with Claude Code as an example, you can fire up the architecture for a website pretty, I want to say pretty easily, but relatively easily with some time invested. The thing that actually I think is most important about the projects that we do is not the underlying architecture, because we could get the same result with a project that we do and leverage just about any tool to build it. It's actually the process we go through. It's not the fact that, I can now make a website and I'm done. If you don't get buy-in, it doesn't matter. Like, at an organization, when you've got 200-300 people, and a lot of people have opinions about, where their program or work or, whatever the case may be, area of interest should be represented and how it should be represented on the, it's how we ended up a few years back with, every homepage had sliders, and those sliders were like 75 slides deep. And it was like, no one's going past slide 2. That is political placating. That is everyone getting a chance to be in the slider, right? The process that we go through is way more important than the technology that we actually implement. Because if we don't go through a process of hearing everyone through our discovery process, it's about hearing everyone, getting everyone a chance to speak, and then helping the organization prioritize. In the end, not everybody can be above the fold, the hero on the homepage. There has to be compromise, and so the organization has to decide what are their priorities and how are they going to place them. And so it's about making sure that people feel heard, that they understand why things are the way they are, and that they get a chance to feed into that, so that if there's something is important, it's getting the right placement and all that kind of stuff. So I sidebarred to that only to say that it's funny because as we started to play with Claude Code and stuff like that, even for ourselves as an agency, and I play around with Claude all the time. I feel like it's a wizard kit that I'm just learning to use. One of our developers said, man, this is really just, he's like, I'm worried about what this does for web development. I said, I think for some things, absolutely. For others, I said, it's not about how fast it can be built or, whatever. I think it's about the process that we go through that's actually what the real value is.
I think because I play around and test Claude Code probably for the last 6 months, let's say, actively. Before that, it was dab into a little bit of here, there are some prompts and compare prompts and see the outcomes from 5 different ones. But actively, okay, look, I'm going to lead into this. I want to learn and understand it. My problem is consistency. Mm-hmm. It is not consistent. When I used to make websites with WordPress, I have my template and I'm going to make a bunch of changes, and then I will present as this is the template we will start. So think of it like a 2-step, V1, V2. I would have a template, and then a client will say, well, this is what we need. Okay, I'm going to change the template, and I will say, I'm starting from this place. So it is a unique template for this. And then all the customizations on top of that will just be all over the place and becomes a very different website. Architecture may be the same. But now with Claude Code, beyond sales pages, I can ask the same thing in 2 chats in 2 different, and it's the inconsistency that is killing me. I have not gotten to a place where it is consistent.
Well, it's actually one thing that I think people haven't totally wrapped their heads around yet. I mean, you think about it, our interaction, everything we've done with computers up until, what we're calling AI right now, was completely deterministic. It gave you the same answer every time because it was a program. It had to follow a path. Maybe there was 1,000 paths, but it had to get there. With probabilistic, it follows a completely different path every time by definition. It's just what it does. It's more like the human brain than, a computer program. So I think it's a lot of people struggle with the fact that I asked it this, it gave me an answer. I asked it again later, it gave me a different answer. What the heck's going on? And it's well, it took in different information this time around, and for better or for worse, it gave you a different answer. And so, learning to control that is a really interesting process.
And we're talking about when you need it to be repetitive, that binary ones and zeros, sometimes, and you need it to be every single time you get this, every single time do this one. And you start to feel like once you have a long enough conversation, it starts to kind of veer off piece by piece. And by the end of it, okay, now we're in an argument and then restarting and all that stuff. But I see the one thing that has helped me the most is it can develop things that I can't do it on my own. So I make automation. I'm make automate. Will give me the JSON file. I put it in. I don't know how to make it. I have no idea how this whole shit works, but it did. It gave me the thing and it works. And it so that part, I don't use it in the creative part because of that. It's so different. Even if you say, I never want you to say unleash, unlock, dashes. It still unleashes the M dashes. Yeah, exactly. I think, I say this a lot, and apologies if I've already said it at some point, but
I remember when I was doing research on mobile devices and mobile device adoption a while ago, and it got me into down this rabbit hole of technology adoption and how people, what have been the major waves of technology adoption, and kind of, how is that these sort of like revolutions of how we've sort of engaged with media and all that kind of stuff. And I remember reading this thing that was just saying, when TV came out, when we cracked, we're like, whoa, look what we can do with TV. All we did with it for the first few years was pointed it at people talking on the radio, because that's all we knew. We just, our entertainment was a guy talking on the radio. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be, look at how we can film him. It's like, that is, we don't know what to do with the technology when it comes out. We just kind of take what we're already doing and sort of start doing it with it. And it takes us a little while to start to see like, oh, I can think completely different. All of a sudden it's just like, oh, you see, like, I've had these moments dozens of times now playing around with Cloud Code and Cloud Cowork and stuff like that, where it's like, I'm trying to get it to do something, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I am missing the opportunity here. I just realized, it's like, it's not about fixing this flow. It's like, actually, I could rethink the whole thing, and get it to do something completely different. So,
and it's changing the way that it definitely, for me, the same thing. I'm changing the way that I solve some problems, because it doesn't need to go the same pattern that it has been for so long. It can change the way that you are tackling a specific development or a workflow or automation, because X, Y, Z, but there could be a different way that I just never knew. And then now more and more, you can actually do it within it. You can do some automations and stuff like that. But what I wanted to ask was, you mentioned there what we call AI now. Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
I mean, AI is such a big, chunky word, isn't it? Like, artificial intelligence. It's like we almost left ourselves nowhere to go after we used AI, right? So I think the other thing is that, like, AI, when I say AI, as we're referring to it now, it's like, it is such a massive spectrum of, like, what everybody's calling AI. And I think that there's just a really big spectrum in there, and it's like, I think we tend to oversimplify it. If you're just getting some, basic media, things like that, like it can kind of just, it can lump it all together. And it's like the AI that, we're using for Cloud Code, as an example, is not necessarily the same AI that, spun out dreams of Terminator and all those kind of things. It's not to say that it isn't all within the same realm of possibility, but yeah, I don't know. I struggle with the term AI sometimes, because what I'm doing with it is fantastic and wonderful and magical, and the best technology should feel like a little bit of magic, but yeah, I think AI is one of those, like, I feel like we didn't give ourselves any runway to carry on. It's like, well, artificial, what comes after that? Just intelligence, and it feels like, I think as we've gotten, more and more people have gotten into it and used to it and played around with it, I think the fear is maybe coming down a little bit, of like, this is going to destroy the economy and make us all, redundant and all the things. It's like, well, I think every major technology has impact, ramifications. It's just going to happen. But I think a lot of, there weren't, if you think of the top 50 jobs in the last 20 years, they didn't exist 20 years ago, like SEO specialist and, like engineer, like back-end system engineer, like, there's all these things that didn't exist prior to the internet. And now they're like the cornerstone of a huge piece of the economy. And I think if we take a step back and we look at kind of the way things have gone, it's probably another thing, we're going to go through. There will be some economic impact, but I think the opportunity it will create will be really fascinating as well.
I think my hot take is not intelligence, because I've used it and I'm like, there is no way an intelligence will make these mistakes. Like, some of the mistakes are really, really, they're like horrible. I have like a couple of examples I will use. One of my employees gave me the percentage difference in a connection rate between 2 weeks for one of my accounts. And like, this one went down by 7.9% from 26 to 24. I was like, how did that happen? Oh, I'm really sorry. I ran it through the AI, and then again, I'm like, but how did it calculate 26 to 24 is a 7.94 drop in the weekly performance? It can make, and we're like, I have a couple of clients who talk about this. They're like, when someone say, "Oh, but this is like a super intelligence, but you need to treat it like an intern." Yeah, but you gave that intern the role of a CMO, so now you're confident.
Yeah.
Did you give your intern the ability to post? No, you told them to do the spreadsheet stuff.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
You see this alignment, and that's why I really don't feel this is intelligence.
I think there's a fair argument for that. I think it is trying its best to mimic intelligence, and I think that might be it. And then every now and then you get that look at, you get that exposure to it, and you're like, oh yeah, you're just trying real hard, but you don't really, it's just a computer program trying its best,
Yeah, and I think the trap that a lot of people, the first time you use it, I had the same feeling. The way that it was designed to talk to you. Mm-hmm. This is fascinating. You know what? I'm going to analyze from this perspective. I know exactly what it is, and I can see it veer off. I'm like, no, stop. That's not it. But the way that it talks, this is a very interesting perspective. I like what you show me here. I know exactly what to do, and then just you can see that it is not getting it. It's making solve the same problem like 4 times in one chat. You're like, oh, just open it.
You're like, never mind. It's all good. Yeah, we have an active thread with a couple of my friends we were talking about. He's like, he said, do you ever notice? And I actually haven't used ChatGPT in a while, even though it was like out of the gate, it was what I was really playing around with. And he said, every time I'm doing something, he's like, it'll get something, and then he'll catch it. And he'll be like, well, that's not right. And it's like, oh, great catch, Jordan. And so he's always sending. He's like, well, another great catch. And he's like, great. It's like has this whole spin on like, you're right, I didn't do what you asked me to do, or check that I gave you the right result. It's just like, great catch. It's really observant of you. It's like flattery instead of like actual answer. Anyway, I think it's funny.
I think these are experiences. If you really try, like I've been like months and months, and you start to notice, and you're absolutely right, the fear starts to go away. Because if someone says there will be a robot that will be a surgeon that will take, like, no, let's just stop right there. There's a lot of ifs in that one statement, and I can tell you today we're not even close, because this is not it. Maybe something different. And if you say this is the worst it will be, still many years, decades, decades.
Yeah, it's been we've had an absolute massive leap forward from, I'm frequently guilty of calling it an operating system, because it's the best operating system we've ever had, right? Going from DOS to Windows was just like, whoa, I can just point at things and get it to just open, as opposed to having to remember what folder directory I'm in and what, /command I need to do to move through this, like it is that kind of massive leap in terms of like going from DOS to Windows. But I don't know, I think it's just really a kick-ass operating system. Like, I don't know.
Now, this will be not so subtle a segue, but there is a lot of people that I would say 25, they were looking at substituting their employees with AI. They were like, we're AI first, and like they meant we will try to reduce how many people we have.
Yeah, you saw it. It was out there.
Yeah. And
I think it's a mistake.
In 2026, I talked with some of the clients that have our lawyers. They pay a lot of money to headhunters to find them employees, and none of them will even think about it. They won't even think about any of those things. It's if the team needs it to save them time on something, maybe they will include it, but they will not even come close to say like, I will let go of people because AI can do it now. What have you seen in your company? How have you been adapting it for your team, for yourself? What are the productivity things that you're seeing that these are good? And what are some of the stories that you've seen from your clients, like they've made horrible mistakes?
Yeah. I mean, we've been looking at AI since pretty early days, and it's, the way we talk about it. And I've been encouraging my team pretty regularly, probably to an annoying amount, to experiment with it, to play with it, to try it out, and to think about their own workflows and processes, where it's just like, what is something that sucks that you hate doing, but it's important? And one of our team members early on, when we were kind of, when I was just showing them ChatGPT and stuff like that, kind of, and saying like, wow, look at this stuff, look at what's coming. And they found, so when we do WordPress websites as an example, one of the things we do as part of that, or, a technology implementation, even technology where there's already an existing like knowledge base and stuff like that, we create custom manuals and we do custom training. And so one of the things that we do as part of this is we go through and we literally screenshot business processes in the back end of the client site, so that when someone inevitably leaves and the person we've trained is gone, the new person who shows up can pop this thing open and go, okay, I need to change this thing on the site. Okay, change the thing on the site. Here it is. And it's screenshots with just, exact step-by-step through the whole back end of like their site. So it's, it makes sense. That's a long process, right? Like, even though we do a recorded session and all this stuff, going through and, our project managers, that was one of their tasks, when they got to the end of a project, was to spend a day or two going through business processes, screenshotting, writing it all up, putting it in a document. Well, and then one of them came across a tool, and the tool now is going to blank out of my head, but it was a tool where you talked and you clicked, and it put it together in a document as you went. And I remember she brought it forward and was like, can we try this? I was like, yeah, let's give it a go. And I think that saved them 20 something hours, that would otherwise be spent on over a few days of just, probably over the course of a week, really, because no one ever has time to just back-to-back screenshot for 4 days, of just going through. And, so she's like, yeah, I could sit down and just go through the process. And every time I clicked, it took a screenshot and it put it in the doc and it took my transcription. So she's like, there was still cleanup to do, things that didn't understand, words that got wrong, maybe a screenshot that I was like, oh, I'm going to get a different one. But, their estimation was like 20 hours being saved on this particular task. And that's great for everybody, because when you have a business process that sucks, like, if you can take that off of someone's plate and give them more time to do more interesting things and still get the outcome, why wouldn't we? Right? Like, from my perspective was, yeah, that's great. There's no value. Like, there is value in people going through and doing things and learning to do them. But I don't think that was one of the cases where it's like, there's value in you spending the next 3 days clicking and typing and clicking and typing and screenshotting and putting into a doc. So, early on, that was something that I think really, when we kind of looked at it, got it in place, and the team started using it, people were just like, oh yeah, this is better, and that's not even really like, that was so early. That was like, it probably barely qualifies as AI now. But yeah, it was just a really interesting example for the team to sort of see that. And
it sounds like the right approach, or the approach that you were taking, is you would look at something that is a time suck or a business process that is like, no one enjoys doing this, but you got fantastic team members, so you can take it off their plate by using AI. And the approach is, now they're free to do heavy mission critical things that will definitely move the needle. And these ones, now we have ways to either reduce the time dramatically or use AI to automate them. And I think that's the approach that I'm also taking, like the manual work, the clicking around, the copying, the pasting, the organizing of the documents.
Yeah.
No one enjoys those processes.
No, nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, oh, I can't wait to clear through, 17 spreadsheets today and try to compile it all into one useful thing. It's like, nobody wakes up excited for that. If they do, there, but like, it's no one I know anyway.
Now, one of the important things that we talked like off camera is how you slowly but surely, with all these processes and people you were hiring, you got to a place where you truly are what a lot of people envision to be an agency owner or a business owner, where you can work on the business instead of in the business. You can be outside of the day-to-day decision making, and everything has to go through Erik, unless it doesn't happen. Can you walk me through the process of what were the first hires? How did you plan it out? What was the process to get to a place where you are today?
Yeah. I mean, the first hires were, I think, for lack of a better word, need specific, right? Like, when we were small, when we were 1, 2, 3, like in that space, those hires were, I was just dangerous enough technically to build stuff, to see the opportunity to, and I got good at a few things, and that allowed us to have a bit of an edge early on. But I also knew where my limitations were. And I think that has probably been one of the guiding factors for me, is like, I can start spinning just about any plate. but I'm also self-aware enough to know that I'm not the best plate spinner for any of them. You know, like I am technical, I can do sales, I can, you know, I can do design, I can do a lot of these things. This probably also comes from just the way I'm wired, and this like, for lack of better words, like, I don't have a strong self-doubt. Like, I am just confident that with enough, like, overconfident is maybe the right way to describe it. Like, I've just always had this belief that, like, with a little bit of time, I'll figure it out, you know? Like, I taught myself to ride a motorbike on YouTube, which, you know, my wife was like, "You what?" after I'd given her a ride on the motorbike. You know, like, I think anything can be learned, and that's really helped me out. The thing that I think has been also really important is knowing when it's like, well, this is no longer the best use of my time. I'm not the best person for this. And so, you know, whether that was hiring a designer, you know, and certainly some of those early hires were probably more unicorn generalists, you know, people who could just mimic me in a lot of ways and help me spin the same plates, you know, so we would just be running around spinning plates together. And I think that worked up until we were about 4 or 5 people. And at that point, that is when I realized, like, okay, we need structure. We need process. We need to think about how we're doing these things, because we've just been reacting to and saying yes to. And that's the kind of stuff that in startup mode is awesome, you know, because everything is just, yeah, well, that's, you know, yeah, we'd love to do that. We'd love to do that. And then at some point you think, well, if we do that, we're going to do it at the expense of something else, right? And so now we have to start being a little bit more strategic about like the stuff we take on and how we organize ourselves and that. So, you know, I brought in Matt, who joined our team, really to just kind of give shape to like project management and stuff like that. And he's risen up through the years with me. He's our president and COO now. And you know, people often wonder like how we work together. We're so different. And I think that is probably one of the best things about our relationship, is that we are so different. Because if we had 2 people like me, we'd have a lot of trouble. You know, and I think that's where the value is. I think in like, you know, I tend to be big picture, dive into stuff, take on a lot of information really quickly, synthesize and be able to kind of make sense of something quickly. But not, you know, I lose interest. I mean, you know, ADHD, and it's apparent if you've known me for a while, because I lose interest in things when they're not, when they get down to the details and the fine points and the stuff like that. And I think it became really apparent early on that the thing that we were hiring for, if we were going to be successful, was like the deficiencies both in myself and the things that I'm not good at or don't want to be doing, and hiring for where I saw the needs in the business in terms of how we were growing. You know, we launched from an opportunity, not from a set in stone business plan that we had laid out. And so I think that's probably been more of a blessing than a curse, because we've been able to just react and flow with things as they've come, as opposed to trying to stay fixed to some trajectory. And I think now, as we've grown up, as we've moved through a number of those sort of like S curves that you hit as you go through growing a business, you know, we're probably in a better place for the decisions and the structure that we've applied to ourselves now. But I think having that flexibility early on was probably really important, because it meant we were open to a lot of things, and we were just sort of problem solvers for hire, if you will.
Interesting. Now, when you're mentioning that around 5-10 people is when you realize you need structure, and you decided to bring in a project manager who has moved through the ranks for over the years, were you looking for specific traits, characteristics, or how did you go about the interview process, specifically hiring client-facing, team management, project management?
I think I've had a bit of a vision. I've had an inch of vision, I think, for each of these roles over the time. And I think the other piece is a willingness or desire or realization that you have to trust the other person to finish the other 90%, right? Like, unless I'm saying, you know, no, I'm gonna command and control everything from the middle, and it all has to flow through me, and, you know, yada, yada, yada. It's exhausting, right? Like, try to do something like that. So, and no one really wants to work in that environment. So for me, when it was, you know, what are the things we can teach, right? I can teach you how to use our sector specific technology. I can teach you, you know, to different ways about doing the things that we do. I can't teach you to give a shit. I can't teach you to, to have respect. I can't teach you to be someone who's okay to fail and then get themselves back up. There's a lot of things that I learned early on that's like, you can't teach. You can certainly help people and guide them, but you can't make them. And I think that is something that early on I sort of realized, like, okay, if we're going to hire people, we have to hire people that they may not be the best developer or the best designer, but they are the hungriest. They are the person who's shown the most interest in wanting to do that thing. And that's been a big piece of it because, interviewed lots of people over the years. And the thing that, I've always hired for personality, I've always hired for fit, because that's the thing you kind of can't change. Like if somebody doesn't react well to tense situations, that's probably not something that you're going to be able to like train out of them. That just might be who they are. And so you either say, is that the right person for this role? Maybe they're awesome and you find a role for them that's a little less tense, and you train them in that space. And that's, we've done that with people. We've had people on our team who said, you know what, I don't think I want to do client facing anymore. It's too stressful. And we said, okay, what do you want to do? Because there's lots of stuff that needs to be done and you're awesome and we love working with you. So how do we keep working together? And being able to evolve with people like that too, I think has been really nice, and I'm glad we've been able to do it.
Is there a difference in your process when you talked about hiring for personalities in your interview when you're looking for client facing versus leadership positions, regardless if the leadership position is like a C-level or a director?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to think that no, and partly because the way that we've gone about hiring, and we've had a few iterations of this, like we, in early COVID, I remember we went through and we were like, oh, it's challenging out there, maybe, and we used a recruiter. We only did that once because the outcome was, it was sort of just lackluster for everybody. It cost us a bunch of money. The person didn't end up lasting more than a week past their warranty or whatever it was that we had with the recruiting company. And we realized in that moment that we're like, I think when you grow a business, I think there is an innate sense of imposter syndrome in everything you do, because you are having to learn the next thing that needs to be done, And so I think you get to these places, when we got to that place and we thought, maybe maybe we need to get a professional and help them help us and do that. And then you realize you're like, no, actually, the way we go about it is, it's unique to us. It is who we are. It is how we do it. And maybe it won't work for everybody, but it gets us the outcome we want. And I think that was the thing that was, when we went through that work with the recruitment company, was like, for us, because culture ended up being so important, and this thing that we really, when you're a small, we're still a sub 20 person agency, culture is incredibly important. You can have I think when you're a 5,000 person agency, sure, you can have a different culture because it's pretty hard to put, culture is more of a motto at that point. It's hard to maintain, but it's critical, I think when you're smaller. And for us, we realized that, like, actually the way we go about hiring, which was, multiple iterations and very organic, and we tried to really understand this person and their motivations, and are they, and to get a sense of like, who are they and how do they like to do things. And I think that our process, for better or for worse, it did a great job for us in terms of like being able to find the right people. And so, to answer your question, I think we haven't actually shifted it all that much for moving people into executive roles and things like that, because it is still part of the core of who we are and how we do things.
It's the culture that you kept saying throughout your answer, because you could get a recruiter, headhunters. At the end of the day, they need to fill a quota. The person is there because there's also this, like you said, like the warranty. But when you go for culture, you can slow it down if you want to. You can spend more time. You can spend more questions. And this feeling of because it's absolutely true. Even when I was hiring for account manager, I was like, I don't know what I'm asking. I don't know why I'm asking this.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I'm just reflecting how I do it. What will be the right way? I know, like, it is that vision. I have a glimpse of, I think this is what will be the right one. And you're trying to go through this process, but you do have this feeling of, I've never hired an account manager, and I'm sitting here across all these people pretending that I know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it so interesting and I think beneficial when it's unique to you, is that you get this chance to make it something that's going to give you the outcome you want. And even if you don't know 100% what that outcome is, you have, like I said, you have a glimpse of that vision, right? And so you know what you're kind of looking for and trying to craft bring in the right people.
Right. Now, as you're growing, you're bringing the right people and things, we've developed a strong culture. What was, if you go back, what was the final piece that kind of locked in? And after that, you're like, now I can step out of the day-to-day activities of my agency. I can truly be a CEO.
I mean, it's a tough one because I think I've been a CEO in training for 3 or 4 years now. I mean, I like the first year, like as somebody who was so hands-on and has kind of had a tactical role in the business very much through most of my time here as we grew it. Certainly, I mean, I have a high level of trust in the people that we hire, partly because I think of how we hire and we bring in and the culture and everything like that. And so it's easy for me in a lot of ways to, give people the grace and space to do their own thing. I think it also comes from a place of like, I worked in a previous agency and it was a sink or swim kind of environment, right? And I think those who swam in that environment went on to swim very well. I think it also drowned a lot of people, and so that's, for me, it was like, I knew that I didn't want to sink or swim, but I also know you can't just do people's jobs for them, and then, so it's like trying to strike this balance of like, you want to give people enough space to feel like they are empowered and in charge and doing their own thing, but you also don't want to give them so much space that if they are if they're out of arm's reach when they suddenly go well under the water and you can't help them, you've let them go too far, and I think that that's something that I think about as like, I want my team to feel supported. I want people to know who they can go to and they can ask. And it's funny because for some, I don't know how it's probably a process of how we've hired, but like everyone on our team is so helpful and trying to, jumps in on anybody else's problem and is, here to help, but are also the kind that want to try to solve it for themselves and can be slow sometimes to put their hand up and say, actually, you know what, I can use a little help. So that's something that we've been working on, over the years. It's like, we are all a group of people that are super quick to help. Remember that like your time will come when it's your turn to put your hand up, and try not to bounce your head off the wall too many times before you realize that you're like, you know what, somebody else here might know the answer to this, and I could, save myself the rest of the afternoon.
It comes from I've realized, or I've noticed for myself, it comes from a good place where someone truly was wanting to resolve it on their own. And when I would talk in those situations, I would say, I can just give you the answer faster. That's all that I'm trying to say. I'm not saying you are incapable. It will take you 3 days with me. It will take you this afternoon because I've seen the pattern. And what I've tried to show to my team is notice patterns. Like patterns will be very clear. Like it's not a unique thing. Like we don't resolve brand new things. This is not biology. Like it is fairly repetitive. Business is fairly repetitive. We can figure out new things as we're growing, but once you notice the pattern, and that's what I try to show them. Like here's, this happens, highly likely this is next, sometimes very rarely that. Notice the pattern next time, you can do it on your own. And that feeling of helping other people, but your job won't be done by someone else. That is the fine line where you don't want to tip too much on either or, because one is you have individualism where no one wants to help anyone. It's not my job, I don't care, like it is what it is, but I did my job fantastic.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have someone that is like so helpful that you need to help them all the time.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Difficult.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's for us, it's been a positive thing for the most part.
Now, what I was gonna say is, as you're going through this process and you're growing, you're learning, you're seeing the patterns, you're hiring all the people, you went through the sink or swim. Now you have a very good team, like you said. I trust them, I believe them, give them grace and space to do their best job. You probably start to let go of a lot of stuff. You start to let go of things that you were doing and that they're now no longer part of your responsibilities. What is one or the top 3 that you would say most important tasks that a CEO should not let go?
A good one, because I will say I didn't know the answer to that for a long time. As I was sort of alluding to earlier, like having been someone who grew up through the business very tactically and even strategically involved, but involved in doing the work. When I decided, okay, yeah, I'll take on this CEO role, I actually felt like, well, what do I do now? Like everybody else is busy. There's stuff happening, all the stuff that I used to be involved in. And now it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not, if I think of it as like a sports metaphor for a second, it's like suddenly I'm no longer a player, I'm a coach. And I was like, oh, that's different. And I think that it took me quite a while. Like I think I probably spent the first year, there's always stuff to do, and I've held on to sales still at this point, and that's probably something I would say is important to, a lot of people over the years have said, just get a sales guy, and it's like, but that's not who we are. So driven by relationships, both when we're meeting new organizations and when we've had organizations with us for 10 years. And that's because we prioritize our relationships. For us, it's like we want to see that organization succeed. We are invested in their success. So relationships are not something you just sort of say, okay, I've been here for 15 years, you're a new guy, here's all my relationships. Like you wouldn't do that in the real world. So why do we do that in business? I think that's something that I would say definitely is hanging on to, or is worth hanging on to long. I think as we've grown, it's also, it's been interesting to see, like I still hold on to brand a little bit. And what I mean by that is like tone, voice, I let a lot of it go into the team and certainly wanted their feedback into it. But, I've held on to the sort of the like core of who we are a little bit. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I think that it's allowed me to help ensure that we're still aligned with where we want it to be going. And that, as we do big and bold and interesting new things, it's still sort of grounded in that, that who we are and how we do things. And, I think the other piece is like, and this is probably a bigger part of my role now than it was years ago, even though I was still the business owner, is, as I'm now in the working on the business phase more than in the business, you can't stop learning, like I think you could easily get to this place and think like, well, I'm the CEO now, I don't, everybody else does the work. You just realize that like, okay, you've built a boat, you've got a boat full of, incredibly capable sailors. Where are you going? That's your job. Right. And that's the thing that like, it's like, as I learned to sort of think about this, and I spent 2-3 years just listening to podcasts, reading books. And it's not that I would say any one of them was like, because there isn't really a manual for like how to do this. There's lots of books that will say this is the, probably there's one out there called literally the CEO manual or something like that. But like all of them are just contextual advice, and a lot of that contextual advice doesn't contextualize to your context. So you have to like, find all the bits and pieces that are in the woodwork that are kind of in between the lines, the meaning of things as opposed to the literal way it was done. And what I found, as I think back on all that stuff that I've kind of consumed over the past number of years, it's really given me a shape for what I think the role of the CEO is here, and what is my role, what are the key things for me to be doing, and yeah, it's been interesting to just see that evolve, and certainly having someone that you can really trust and has the operational side of it well in hand, is it's a blessing, certainly, because it's allowed me to have the space to figure out like what is the right role of the CEO right now. And so now I spend a lot of time looking out into the ocean and say, okay, where should we be going? Who should we be meeting up with? What, who are the organizations who's good for us? Who's not good for us? Reading the weather a little bit.
It's a different, like you're saying, it's a different game. You learn to play for a long time, and now you're in a different position than you were a player. You had impact like on the game any moment, and now as someone on the sideline, you're hoping that everything you've set in place will actually work to get the score and the result that you want. So it's a different game that you're playing, and I see some similarities that I always tell people. I think it depends on how you are as Are you a technical CEO? Or are you like marketing, sales? Because I won't let go of sales. I think like until the last day, I will still take sales calls and talk to people because I like to build relationships. And I think it's not that no one can't do it. I don't think that. I think the level of investment that I would have, a sales guy won't. He has a different outcome at the end of the day. And you will need salespeople to grow for sure. That's part of the process. But still, there will probably be strategic relationships that I would still be involved in because I think I will have a bigger impact. But there are all things that, like the brand, I'm not good at that. I would easily let go because
and I think you're spot on. I think there's probably 2 or 3 things for each person as they rise into this role that it's like, well, I should probably hold on to this because I have this is something that I'm core. I feel is core to who we are, and I don't mean that I've held on to the brand and like, we have a designer and she's just actually brought us into, we just went through a full redesign process. So we're actually not far out from a whole new look and feel. But what I think it's kept is the spirit. And I think that that's the piece that, has been mine to hold is like, what is the sort of core of the mission that we're on, if you will.
Absolutely. And you see right now, the questions are, Tim Cook is stepping away. What would Apple be like? Look, it's one guy stepping on, but it's that, like you said, the core, the feel that a CEO creates. Now, Erik, if someone listens to this and they're like, man, this is fantastic and amazing, and they want to work with you, how do people get a hold of you to work with you?
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly find us on our website, YeeBooDigital.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I've actually just started this thing's called a Substack. Is it Substack the right word? Last little while I've been publishing there, just getting my random thoughts on the, it's called clicks and contributions. So I've been getting my thoughts on that out into the universe. And So our website's probably the best place. And or if you see me out in the world, see me at a conference, just throw a pencil at me. That'll get my attention.
Amazing. Erik, thank you so much for the time. This was very informative. I appreciate everything that you share with us, and I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity.